Welcome to Relaxing Revenge Storytelling. I'm your host, and tonight's story is a real treat.
My name is Billy Davies. I'm 37 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I was standing in the hallway of my Aunt Patrice's house in Bedford County, Virginia, holding a sheet pan of French toast I'd woken at 5 in the morning to make when I heard my mother's voice come through a baby monitor she didn't know was on. She was in the guest room. The receiver was sitting on the kitchen counter, plugged in for my cousin's toddler who was napping upstairs. The volume was up. And my mother, Lorraine Davies, who had just turned 60 that morning, who had just opened the gold bracelet I'd saved 4 months to buy her, said to her sister Patrice, clear as a bell, clear as the dogwood out the window, "Billy is disposable. She gives everything and never asks why. Just keep her busy and she won't notice the house is already in your brother's name." I want to tell you what that word did to my hands, but first I have to tell you about a letter I hadn't found yet. If this is hitting close to home, if you've ever realized too late that someone you loved was studying you the whole time, please subscribe and stay with me. This story matters, and the comment section is where people who have lived this come to be seen. I'll meet you there at the end. Welcome back, friends. This channel exists for people who were the helper, the fixer, the one who got called instead of thanked. If you've ever been introduced as someone's helper instead of their daughter, their son, their family, you already know the language we speak here. Tonight's story is going to ask a lot of you, because it asks a lot of me to tell it, but there is a letter at the end of it. A letter written in trembling cursive by a woman who is no longer here, who saw me when no one in that kitchen ever did. To understand how I came to be standing in that hallway with a tray of French toast going cold in my hands, you have to go back to a Tuesday afternoon in 1992. A screen door, a ceramic mug, and a woman named Opal who braided my hair while humming a hymn she only half remembered. My grandmother Opal lived in a white farmhouse outside Roanoke, on a road that turned to gravel half a mile before her mailbox. The dogwood tree in her front yard was planted the year I was born, 1987, and by the time I was old enough to remember it, the trunk was already as thick as my forearm. Opal had a sewing room on the second floor with a window that looked east, and every Tuesday after school my mother would drop me off there because Tuesday was the day the home health aide didn't come. I was 9. I didn't know that's why I was there. I thought I was there because Opal wanted me. I think both things were true, but only one of them lasted. She kept a ceramic coffee mug on the shelf above her sewing machine, cream-colored with a chip on the rim shaped like a tooth. She'd pour me half a cup of coffee cut with so much milk it was almost white, and she'd sit me on the stool beside her and let me feed thread through her bobbin while she hemmed slacks for the Methodist ladies who paid her in casseroles. She braided my hair on Tuesdays because my mother said French braids were too much fuss for a school morning. Opal would hum while she braided. Off-key, always the same hymn, In the Garden, but only the chorus, because she said the verses had been written by a man who'd never actually been in a garden. That's the woman I'm grieving. I want you to see her before I tell you what they did to her memory, before I tell you what they did to mine. My father left when I was 11, walked out on a Sunday after church, came back Wednesday for his fishing rods, and that was the last sustained conversation he ever had with my mother. Lorraine took it the way she took everything, by reorganizing it into a story where she was the one who'd been wronged and someone else was responsible for fixing it. The someone else, increasingly, was me. By 13, I was making her grocery lists. By 15, I was paying her car insurance out of a part-time job at the Food Lion. By 18, I had a full scholarship to Virginia Tech and a mother who cried for 3 weeks straight about being abandoned, until I transferred to a commuter school in Lynchburg and drove home every weekend to make sure she ate. I became a forensic loan auditor for a regional bank because I was good at finding the lie inside a stack of paper. I could look at a mortgage application and tell you in 90 seconds which numbers had been adjusted to fit a narrative. It is, I now understand, the exact wrong career for someone who refuses to apply the same scrutiny to her own family. When I was 25, Lorraine was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and my supervisor offered me a transfer to the bank's Richmond headquarters. A promotion, a real one. I turned it down inside of a week because Lorraine told me she'd been crying in the pharmacy parking lot trying to read the label on her metformin. I moved home. I gave up the Richmond apartment I'd already put a deposit on. And 6 months later, I overheard her tell our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell. Billy had nowhere else to go, you know. The bank thing didn't work out for her. I didn't correct her. I never did. That was always the deal. I gave her the truth, and she rewrote it into a version of me that made her look better, and I let her, because she was my mother, and because somewhere underneath all of it, I still believed that if I gave enough, eventually she would love me back the way she loved Marcus. Marcus is my brother, 2 years younger. He lived in Roanoke, worked sporadically, and called Lorraine Mama in a tone that always sounded like he was asking for something. He usually was. When he got a DUI at 28, I paid the lawyer. When his ex took him to court for child support arrears, I built the spreadsheet that tracked his payments because Lorraine said he wasn't good with computers. For 4 years, I managed my brother's child support schedule for a child I had met exactly twice. I did it because Lorraine asked me to. I did it because Marcus's ex-wife was a kind woman who didn't deserve to chase money. I did it because if I stopped, Lorraine would tell people I'd abandoned my own nephew. I am telling you these things in a row so you understand the shape of the years. It wasn't one big sacrifice. It was 1,000 small ones, each of them small enough to seem reasonable in the moment and large enough in aggregate to consume an entire adult life. In 2017, Lorraine needed dental implants, $6,200. The insurance covered nothing. I paid it from the savings account I'd been building for a down payment on a house I'd been pretending I was going to buy. Lorraine told Marcus she'd paid for them herself. She used the receipt with my name and my card number on it, to claim a medical expense deduction on her taxes that she never asked me about and never offered to split. I found out 2 years later when I was helping her find a misplaced 1099 and saw the deduction on a return she'd had H&R block file. I asked her about it in the kitchen, gently, the way I asked her everything. She said, "Well, you wouldn't have wanted me to leave money on the table, would you, honey?" and asked me to pass the salt. In 2019, my grandmother Opal died. She was 84. She had been in a nursing home in Salem for the last 14 months of her life, and I had visited her every Tuesday because Tuesday was still the day the aide didn't come. I drove the 45 minutes each way after work. I brought her applesauce because she took her pills with applesauce. The texture of the capsules made her gag without it, and nobody else seemed to know this. I brushed her hair on the Tuesdays when the staff was short. I held her hand through the last 6 weeks when she stopped recognizing most people but still knew the sound of my voice. She'd say, "There's my Tuesday girl," and squeeze my fingers and ask if I'd remembered to bring the applesauce. When she died, Lorraine handled the announcement. Lorraine handled the church. Lorraine called the relatives. And Lorraine told me 2 days after the funeral that the estate was nothing but debt. Honey, I'm sorry. There's nothing left. She asked if I could float the funeral costs, $4,800, and pay myself back when the small life insurance policy paid out. The life insurance policy, I would learn 3 years later, paid out $14,000. I never saw a cent of it. I paid the funeral home in 2 installments and ate ramen for the spring. At the funeral, my mother hugged me and I felt her hand slip into my coat pocket and lift out my car keys. She said she wanted to move my car so Aunt Patrice could get out of the driveway. I let her. I always let her. That was the year I started understanding somewhere underneath the part of me that could still articulate it, that my mother's affection was an inventory check. Every hug was an audit. I want to skip ahead now to the spring of last year because that's when the architecture of what they were doing began to surface. First as a paper cut, then as a wound I couldn't close. Lorraine needed a hip replacement. I took 2 weeks off work to coordinate the surgery, the home health, the post-op physical therapy, the prescription refills, the meal delivery service I paid for out of pocket because the one her insurance covered made her food taste like cardboard. The night before the surgery, in the pre-op intake room at Lynchburg General, a nurse handed her a clipboard with 3 forms. Lorraine looked at me and said, "Honey, I can't read the small print. My eyes are watering. Sign these for me. They're just consent forms. The woman explained them already." I signed 3 pages. I signed the bottom of a 4th page that was blank because Lorraine said the nurse would fill in the rest later. I was 40 hours into a stretch of 3 hours of sleep and the smell of hospital disinfectant and the low, constant hum of my mother's anxiety, and I signed a blank piece of paper because she asked me to. That blank piece of paper, I would learn 9 months later, was a notarized power of attorney form that gave my mother authority over my grandmother Opal's farmhouse, a property that, on paper at the time, was still part of Opal's unresolved estate and that Lorraine had been quietly working through probate without telling me. I didn't know any of that yet. What I knew in the weeks after her hip surgery was that I was so exhausted I started having heart palpitations in the bank parking lot. I went to urgent care on a Thursday afternoon and the doctor took one look at my blood pressure and admitted me to the hospital overnight for what he wrote on the chart as exhaustion and dehydration. Lorraine was at home, recovering on the recliner I'd rented for her, watching her shows. When I called to tell her I was being kept overnight, she said, "Well, who's going to make my dinner?" That was the week I would learn later that someone forged my signature on a quitclaim deed transferring Opal's farmhouse from the estate, now controlled by Lorraine through that blank power of attorney, to my brother Marcus. The date on the forgery was the Tuesday I was on an IV at Lynchburg General with electrodes stuck to my chest. But I am getting ahead of the part that matters. Because before any paper came to light, before any notary called me, my brother Marcus took out a $41,000 home equity loan against the farmhouse. The farmhouse I didn't know he owned, that he didn't actually own, that had been transferred to him on a piece of paper I didn't sign, and he used the money to start a food truck, tacos, in a town that already had 3 taco trucks. The food truck failed in 4 months. The loan remained secured against the farmhouse, accruing interest, and that summer, I lost my apartment. I want to walk you through this carefully because the mechanism is the kind of thing that only happens to people who have been trained not to ask questions. 18 months earlier, Lorraine had asked me to co-sign a medical credit line for a procedure her insurance partially covered. Standard family thing, she said. She'd make the payments. It was just to keep the interest rate manageable. I co-signed. She made the payments for 14 months. Then she stopped. Because I learned much later, she had started redirecting that monthly amount to help Marcus cover the failing food truck's lease. The medical credit line went to collections. As a co-signer, the default hit my credit report. My credit score dropped 190 points in 6 weeks. My apartment building, which ran annual credit checks at lease renewal, declined to renew my lease. They were polite about it. The leasing manager looked at her screen and then at me and said, "Ms. Davies, I am really sorry, but the system is the system." I moved into a studio above a dry cleaner on Memorial Avenue. The window faced an alley. The radiator clanged from October to April. I told no one at work. I started bringing my lunch in a plastic bag instead of the canvas tote I used to use because the canvas tote had been a Christmas gift from Lorraine and I couldn't look at it without crying. That fall, Lorraine organized a family reunion at Aunt Patrice's house in Bedford County. 40 people, a catered pig roast. Lorraine assigned me to the kitchen. "You're so good at this kind of thing, honey. Just keep the platters full and help Patrice with the desserts." I drove out the night before to help set up. I slept on a fold-out in the den. I was up at 4:30 in the morning frying bacon for 40 people. I served from the kitchen all day. I did not sit at the table. The next week, my cousin Tasha tagged me in a Facebook album from the reunion. 63 photos. I went through them one by one, looking for myself. In photo 41, you can see the side of my arm holding a serving dish. In photo 58, you can see the back of my head through the kitchen pass-through. The caption on the album was, "My beautiful family, all together." Lorraine had posted it. She had cropped me out of the only photo I was actually visible in, a shot of the dessert table, by tightening the frame to exclude the elbow that was mine. I want to stop here for a moment and say something to you directly, because I know some of you are listening to this in your kitchen or your car or on your lunch break, and you are recognizing things. If you have ever given someone everything and then heard them describe you as optional to someone else, you are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are finally hearing in words what they have been saying with their actions for years. Tell me in the comments what word you heard. The one that landed like a stone. I read them. I read everyone. Now I have to take you back to the brunch, because everything I've told you so far is the soil. The brunch is where the seed cracked open. Lorraine's 60th birthday, April, Aunt Patrice's house again. Lorraine had asked me to host it, meaning in her vocabulary, she had asked me to plan it, fund it, cook it, and clean up after it while she received the credit. I had agreed because I always agreed. I had bought her the gold bracelet because she had mentioned casually that her friend Diane's daughter had given Diane a gold bracelet for her 60th, and wasn't that just so thoughtful? I had woken at 5 in the morning to make French toast from a recipe of opals with the cinnamon and the orange zest. Because Lorraine had said once that nobody made it like opal anymore, and I had wanted, for one morning, to be the person who could give that back to her. I was carrying the sheet pan from the kitchen to the dining room when I heard her voice through the baby monitor on the counter. My cousin's toddler was upstairs napping in the guest room. The transmitter was up there. The receiver was on the kitchen island 3 feet from where I was standing. "Lorraine, Patrice, I'm telling you, she's already done all the legwork on the deed. Marcus has the paperwork. It went through clean." Patrice, "And she doesn't know?" Lorraine, "Billy is disposable. She gives everything and never asks why. Just keep her busy and she won't notice the house is already in your brother's name. By the time she figures it out, if she ever does, Marcus will have leveraged it and it'll be too late to undo anything." Patrice, after a long pause, "Lorraine, that's your daughter." Lorraine, "She's my helper. She always has been. Marcus is my son." The French toast was steaming through the foil. I could feel the heat through the dish towel I had wrapped around the handles of the pan. I stood there for what I think was about 4 seconds and what felt like the rest of my life. Then I walked the pan into the dining room and set it on the trivet and said, "Breakfast is up, everybody." I said it in the voice I had been using for 37 years. I served everyone. I sang happy birthday. I cleared the plates. I drove home that afternoon and sat on the floor of my studio apartment with my back against the radiator and did not cry. I did not cry because something inside me had gone very quiet, and crying was not the appropriate response. The appropriate response was something I did not have a name for yet. What I had instead was a phone call 3 days later from a notary in Roanoke. Her name was Mrs. Halverson. She had a voice like a kindergarten teacher who had once been a court reporter. She said, "Miss Davies, I'm calling to confirm a signature on a quitclaim deed filed last August. Standard verification. We're updating our records. The deed transfers a property at 4418 Mill Creek Road from the estate of Opal Davies to a Marcus Davies. Your signature appears on the document as the executor's witness. Can you confirm the date? August 7th of last year." I sat down on the floor of my studio for the second time that week. August 7th of last year was the Tuesday I had been on an IV at Lynchburg General with electrodes stuck to my chest. I said, "Mrs. Halverson, I did not sign that document." She was quiet for a long moment, then she said, "Ma'am, would you be able to come into the office? I have the original here. I'd like you to look at it." I drove to Roanoke the next morning. Mrs. Halverson was a woman in her early 60s with reading glasses on a chain and a small framed photo of 2 grandchildren on her desk. She slid the deed across to me. The signature was a passable imitation of mine. The loop of the B, the way I cross my D's, but it was wrong. Anyone who actually wrote with my hand would know. The pressure was wrong. The slant was wrong. The B sat too low on the baseline. She watched my face. She said, "Ma'am, this is not your handwriting." I said, "No." She set down her pen. Her expression shifted, and I want to tell you about this shift because it was the first time in months, maybe years, that another adult human being had looked at me with something other than expectation. She looked at me with concern, pure, professional, uncomplicated concern. She said, "I'm going to flag this for the county recorder's office. There is a fraud review process. It can take up to 90 days. In the meantime, do not contact the parties listed on this deed. Do you have legal representation?" I shook my head. She wrote a name and a number on a Post-it note. She said, "She's good. She does estate work. Tell her I sent you." I drove from her office in Roanoke directly to the farmhouse on Mill Creek Road. I had not been there since the cleanup after Opal's funeral. The key was still on my ring. Opal had given it to me when I was 23, a copy of her own, because I drove out sometimes on Sundays to help her with the lawn. I had never taken it off the ring. Even after Lorraine told me the estate was all debt, I had kept the key. The house was empty. The power was off. There was a thin layer of dust on the kitchen counter and a wasp's nest in the corner of the back porch. The dogwood out front was just beginning to bud. I walked through the room slowly, the living room, the kitchen with the green formica, the hallway with the framed photo of my grandfather in his Navy uniform, and the sewing room on the second floor with the window that looked east. The sewing cabinet was still there, a walnut secretary with a fold-down lid, sized for a portable singer. Opal had inherited it from her own mother. After her death, when Lorraine and Aunt Patrice had divided up anything worth taking, nobody had wanted the sewing cabinet because it was scratched and the lid was warped. Lorraine had told me I could have it if I wanted. "For sentimental reasons, honey, but it's not worth anything." I had said yes, but I had never come to get it because every time I'd planned to, Lorraine had needed something more urgent. I sat down on the floor in front of the cabinet. I opened the lid. The singer was still inside, threaded with the brown cotton Opal had been using when she went into the nursing home. Below the machine well was a shallow drawer, and below the drawer was a felt-lined bottom panel. I had played with that panel as a child. I knew it lifted out. I lifted it. Underneath, taped to the underside of the panel with masking tape that had yellowed and curled at the edges, was a sealed envelope. White, letter-sized. My name on the front, in trembling cursive. Billy Marie. She had used my middle name. Only Opal ever used my middle name. I sat on that floor for a long time before I opened it. I want to tell you what I was thinking, but I wasn't thinking. I was just holding it. The way you hold something that has been waiting for you for years. The paper was light and the envelope was thicker than one sheet. There was something else inside. The handwriting on the front was the same hand that had labeled the spice jars in her kitchen and the recipe cards in her tin and the photo albums in the front room. The hand that had braided my hair while humming "In the Garden." A hand I had not seen on a piece of paper in 5 years. I opened it with my thumbnail, slowly so as not to tear the flap. Inside were 2 documents. One was a single sheet of unlined cream paper, folded in thirds with Opal's handwriting on both sides. The other was a notarized addendum to her will, dated September 2019, 2 months before her death, signed by Opal May Davies and witnessed by a Roanoke attorney named Carlton Reeves and a notary whose stamp I could still read clearly. I read the legal document first because my hands were shaking too hard to read the letter. The addendum named me Billy Marie Davies as sole heir to the farmhouse at 4418 Mill Creek Road and as sole beneficiary of a credit union account at Member 1 Federal, account number redacted, containing at the time of the document's notarization $74,000. $74,000. The number my mother had told me after Opal's funeral did not exist. I put the legal addendum down on the floor beside me very carefully, the way you put down a glass of water when your hands are not entirely under your control. Then I unfolded the letter. I am going to read it to you. I have read it now perhaps 100 times. I have it memorized. But I'm going to read it to you slowly, the way I read it that afternoon, sitting on the floor of an empty house with the April light coming through the east window and a wasp tapping somewhere against the porch screen downstairs. She wrote, "Billy Marie, if you are reading this, then you found the place I asked the Lord to send you to. I'm writing this on a Tuesday in August of 2019, which I expect will not mean anything to you, but it is the day after you came out to brush my hair and bring me applesauce, and I am writing it because I do not have much time left, and there are things I want you to know that I am not going to get to say out loud." I had to stop there. I had to put the letter down on my knee and breathe for a minute because the room had gone very small. I want to tell you first that I know what is going to happen after I'm gone. I am old, baby, but I'm not stupid. I have watched your mother for 60 years, and I have watched my son's wife handle her for 40 of those, and I know what they are. Your mother loves you the way some people love a good tool. She thinks you do not know this. I think you have always known this, and you have been hoping you were wrong. You are not wrong, baby. I'm sorry. I would have liked to be wrong too. I started crying then. Not the way I'd expected to cry, not loud, just water on my face, steady like a faucet that won't quite close. I want to tell you what I have done. I went to see Carlton Reeves in September, and I had him draw up an addendum to my will that puts the farmhouse and the Member 1 account in your name alone. Your mother does not know about the account. I never told her. She thinks I lived on Social Security and your grandfather's pension, which is what I let her think, because I knew if she knew there was money, she would find a way to need it. The account is what your grandfather and I saved for 41 years. He wanted it to go to a granddaughter who would understand what it meant. We only had the one, you. I asked Carlton to hide the addendum where only someone who loved my sewing room would find it. Your mother has not been in my sewing room since 1978. Your brother has not been in my sewing room ever. You are the only one who ever sat on that stool. You knew where the bobbins were. You knew where the chalk was. You will know where to look. I read that paragraph 3 times. Each time, a different part of it hit me. They will try to erase you from this family's memory, baby. They will tell stories where you are not in the picture. They will keep you busy so you do not notice what they are taking. They will use the goodness in you as the very thing they steal with. I have watched it happen to other women in this family for 3 generations, and I am tired of watching. So I'm putting you in ink. I'm putting you on a notarized piece of paper that says, this was hers, not theirs, hers. The farmhouse is yours. It always was. Even before I wrote it down. From the first Tuesday you came up the porch steps with that green book bag and asked me what I was sewing, this house was yours. You just did not have the paper yet. Now you do. I want you to know something. I am a forensic loan auditor. I look at paper for a living. I have read 10,000 documents in 12 years. I have never read a sentence that did what that sentence did to me. You just did not have the paper yet. Now you do. She went on. I want to give you permission to do some things because I know you, and I know you will not do them unless someone you trust tells you it is allowed. You are allowed to stop. You have been running errands for your mother since you were 13 years old, and I have watched you do it from the porch on Sundays, and I have wanted every Sunday to tell you to put the bag down and go home. I am telling you now, put the bag down. Go home. The home, baby, is this one. You are allowed to be angry. Anger is not a sin. Anger is the body telling the truth when the mouth has been trained not to. You will be angry when you read this, and you should let yourself be. Do not swallow it the way you have swallowed everything else. Let it sit in your chest until it tells you what it knows. You are allowed to grieve me without grieving her. They are two different losses. I died of being 84. She died of being herself a long time ago. You can mourn one without making peace with the other. You do not owe her the funeral you are still trying to give her. She has been gone since you were 9. You are allowed to use the money. It is not blood money, and it is not pity money. It is 41 years of your grandfather and me saving every spare dollar so that one of our grandchildren would not have to live the way we did. We picked you. Use it. Buy something stupid with the first $100. I would like that. You are allowed to be loved without earning it. I know this is the one you will struggle with. I struggled with it too. I want you to practice. Start with the dogwood. It is going to bloom whether you deserve it or not. Sit on the porch in April and let it bloom for you. I had to stop reading then because I could not see the paper. I sat on the floor of the sewing room with the letter on my knee, and I cried the way I had not cried since I was 9 years old. The year my father left and my mother told me I was the woman of the house now. I cried for Opal. I cried for the Tuesdays. I cried for the 37-year-old woman sitting on the floor who had needed to be told in writing by someone who was dead that she was allowed to be loved without earning it. She had signed it. I love you, baby. I always did. The mug is yours too. Grandma. The mug. The ceramic mug with the chip on the rim. I had taken it home from her funeral cleanup because Lorraine had been about to throw it in the donation box. I had wrapped it in a dish towel and put it in my purse. It was in my kitchen cabinet at the studio apartment on the second shelf where I could see it every morning when I reached for a glass. She had known I would take it. She had known. I sat in that sewing room until the light through the east window had gone gold and then orange and then thin. I read the letter 4 more times. I folded it and put it back in the envelope. I put the addendum in a separate folder I had brought with me from the car. I drove home to Lynchburg in a kind of silence I had not experienced before. Not empty, not peaceful, just still, like the inside of a bell after it stops ringing. The next morning, I called the attorney whose name Mrs. Halverson had written on the post-it note. Her name was Janet Whitcomb. I told her what I had found. I emailed her scans of the addendum and the forged quitclaim deed. She called me back within 2 hours and said, Miss Davies, I'm going to ask you a question and I want you to answer honestly. Do you want to pursue criminal charges against the parties who forged your signature? Or do you want to focus on getting the property restored to your name and walking away clean? I said, I want the property restored. I do not want to spend the next 2 years in a courtroom with my mother. She said, that is the answer I was hoping you'd give. We can do that. The fraud review is already in motion thanks to the notary's flag. The addendum supersedes the power of attorney because it predates the date your mother claims you authorized her to act. The quitclaim deed will be voided. Marcus's home equity loan will become an unsecured personal debt. His problem, not yours, not the property's. This will take about 90 days. In the meantime, I want you to stop doing one thing. I said, what? She said, stop. Just stop. Stop answering her calls, stop paying her bills, stop coordinating her medications, stop being the woman who holds her life together, not as revenge, as containment. You cannot make clean decisions while you are still inside the machine. Step outside the machine. I said, okay. I did not call my mother that day. I did not call her the next day. I did not call her for 5 weeks. In those 5 weeks, the following things happened. The pharmacy where I had set up Lorraine's auto refills called her on day 6 because I had not approved the monthly authorization. She did not know the password to the account. She called Marcus. Marcus did not know the password. The auto refill stopped. Her metformin lapsed for 9 days before she figured out how to manually request a new prescription. And during those 9 days, her blood sugar spiked badly enough that she went to urgent care, where they billed her insurance, which she had not realized I had been paying the supplemental premium on out of my own account for the last 4 years. The supplemental policy lapsed for non-payment in week 3. The property tax bill on the farmhouse arrived at Marcus's address because the quitclaim deed had redirected the mailing, and Marcus did not understand what it was. He let it sit on the kitchen counter for 3 weeks before a delinquency notice arrived in red ink. He called Lorraine, panicked. Lorraine called Aunt Patrice. Aunt Patrice told her to call me. Lorraine called me. I did not answer. The county recorder's office sent Marcus a fraud inquiry letter about the quitclaim deed in week 4. He read the words, potential criminal referral, and called a lawyer who told him the consultation fee was $350. Marcus did not have $350. He called Lorraine. Lorraine called every cousin she had. None of them had been managing any of her affairs, and none of them knew how. Aunt Patrice, in a phone call I would hear about later from my cousin Tasha, told Lorraine, you should have put her at the table, Lorraine. You should have put her at the table. In week 5, my phone rang at 7 in the evening. It was Lorraine. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. I listened to it sitting on the floor of the studio apartment with the ceramic mug from Opal's farmhouse on the carpet beside me. The voicemail said, "Billy, honey, I do not know what has gotten into you, but this has gone on long enough. The pharmacy is a mess. Marcus is being harassed by the county about some clerical thing. I need you to call me. We are family. So are you still bringing the potato salad sundae?" She had not mentioned the baby monitor. She had not mentioned the deed. She had not asked if I was all right. She had asked if I was bringing the potato salad. The complete absence of acknowledgement was the blade. It was not denial. It was a woman who had decided that the conversation we needed to have was simply not going to happen, because if it did not happen, it had not been real. I did not call her back. I did, however, mail her an envelope. Inside the envelope was a photocopy of Opal's letter, a photocopy of the addendum, and a single sheet of paper on which I had written one sentence in my own handwriting. "I found what Grandma left me, and what you took." I did not sign it. She knew the handwriting. She called me 11 times that week. I did not answer any of them. She left voicemails that traveled through every register a person can travel through. First wounded, then indignant, then conciliatory, then threatening, then weeping. In the 7th voicemail, she said, "You always were ungrateful." In the 9th, she said, "You are killing me, Billy." In the 11th, she said, "Puke, please. Honey, I do not know how to do any of this without you." That last one was the only true thing she had said to me in 10 years. I did not call back. In June, the fraud review concluded. Janet Whitcomb called me on a Wednesday morning to tell me the quitclaim deed had been formally voided, the farmhouse was restored to my name as sole heir per the addendum, the credit union account had been transferred, with 3 years of interest, now closer to $78,000. And Marcus's home equity loan had been converted to unsecured personal debt for which the property was no longer collateral. The lender had begun aggressive collection proceedings against Marcus directly. Janet said, "He will likely have to declare bankruptcy. That is not your problem. Your problem is signing these closing documents. Are you free Friday?" I was free Friday. I signed the documents in Janet's office in Lynchburg, sitting in a leather chair across from a woman who had treated me throughout the entire 90-day process like an adult human being whose interests mattered. When I signed the final page, she slid the folder across the desk to me and said, "Congratulations, Miss Davies. You own a farmhouse in Boatort County, free and clear, and you have just under $80,000 in a credit union account in Roanoke. What are you going to do?" I said, "I think I am going to go sit on the porch for a while." That weekend, I drove out to Mill Creek Road with 2 suitcases, the ceramic mug wrapped in a dish towel, and a box of cleaning supplies. I had taken a week of vacation from the bank. I scrubbed the kitchen. I had the power turned back on. I bought a coffee maker at the Walmart in Delville. On Sunday morning, I made coffee and carried it out to the porch in Opal's mug and sat in the rocking chair that had been on that porch since before I was born. The dogwood was past peak bloom, but still throwing white petals down across the lawn whenever the wind moved. The Sunday morning quiet of a country road in Virginia is a specific quiet. You can hear individual birds. You can hear the screen door of the neighbor's house a quarter mile up the road. You can hear your own breathing. I sat there for 2 hours. In the months since, my life has taken on a shape I want to describe to you because if you are listening to this and you are still inside the machine, I want you to know what is possible on the other side of stopping. I kept my job at the bank in Lynchburg for the first 6 months. Then, in September, I applied for the transfer to Richmond that I had turned down 12 years earlier. The same position no longer existed, but a senior auditor position did, with a $31,000 pay increase and a relocation allowance. I got the job, I kept the farmhouse, I drive out there most weekends and a lot of Fridays, and I'm slowly making it mine. I painted the sewing room a color called morning linen. I left the sewing cabinet exactly where it was. I bought a small love seat and put it by the east window. That is where I read in the evenings. Lorraine and I have not spoken in 14 months. She has tried twice more to re-enter. Once, in October, she sent me a birthday card with a $50 bill inside and a note that said, "You know I love you most." I returned the cash with a cashier's check and a note that said, "Please do not send me money." The second attempt was at Christmas through Aunt Patrice, who called me to say that Lorraine was really struggling and would I consider just a short visit. I told Aunt Patrice that I loved her and that I appreciated her concern, but that the answer was no and that I would not be discussing it further. Aunt Patrice was quiet for a moment and then said, "Billy, I'm sorry for all of it. I should have said something at that brunch." I said, "You said something to her later. That counts for more than you know. Marcus declared bankruptcy in August. The food truck is in a junkyard in Roanoke. He works at an auto parts store and lives in a duplex 2 miles from Lorraine. I do not wish him ill. I do not wish him anything. He has become, to me, the way a weather system becomes. Something that happens elsewhere, that I read about occasionally, that does not require my response." Lorraine's 60th birthday party last spring had 40 guests. Her 61st birthday party last month had 9. Nobody coordinated the invitations. Nobody made the calls. Nobody woke at 5 in the morning to make French toast from Opal's recipe. My cousin Tasha posted one photo from it, a small table, a grocery store cake, Lorraine in the middle, smiling the smile she has always smiled when she wants the camera to believe she's loved. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I closed the app and went out to the porch. I want to tell you about the porch. I sit out there most evenings now. I drink coffee from Opal's ceramic mug, the chip on the rim still shaped like a tooth, the cream color faded slightly from 40 years of dishwashers. I watch the dogwood. In April it blooms. In October it goes red. In January the branches look like a charcoal sketch against the sky. I have started learning to sew on Opal Singer because there is something in me that wants to do the thing she did, on the machine she did it on, in the room where she did it. I am not very good yet. The slacks I hemmed for myself last month have a pucker on the left cuff. Opal would have laughed and shown me how to fix it. Instead, I fixed it by trial and error, and I think she would have laughed at that too. I have started writing things down, not for anybody, just for me. A small notebook I keep on the kitchen counter beside the mug. On Tuesdays, because Tuesdays are still Tuesdays, I write a short note to Opal. I tell her what happened that week. I tell her about the dogwood. I tell her that the supplemental insurance lapsed and I did not pick up the call. I tell her that I'm learning to be loved without earning it. I tell her I'm practicing. I used to think love and usefulness were the same thing. I was wrong. They are not even related. Love is what someone does when they have nothing to gain from you. Usefulness is what someone takes when they have decided you are not a person. I spent 37 years confusing the two because the woman who raised me trained me to. The woman who actually loved me had to die to teach me the difference, and even then she had to put it in writing because she knew I would not believe her otherwise. If you are listening to this and you are the helper in your family, the one who gets called instead of thanked, the one who is described as optional to people you would step in front of a bus for, I want to tell you 2 things. The first is that the people who love you do not describe you that way, ever, to anyone. If you have heard yourself described that way, you are not crazy and you are not too sensitive. You have heard the truth and your job now is to believe it. The second thing is that you do not have to confront them. You do not have to scream. You do not have to win an argument. You can simply stop. You can put the bag down. You can go home. And the home, sometimes, is a place you did not know was yours. Left to you by someone you did not know had been watching in a sewing cabinet you almost forgot to open. That is the end of the story I came to tell you. 1 ceramic mug, 1 letter taped under a sewing cabinet, and 1 porch with a dogwood tree planted in 1987. If any part of this landed for you, if you heard a word in your own kitchen once that you have never been able to unhear, please tell me about it in the comments. I read them. I read every one. Studies on family estrangement consistently find that the adult children who pull back from harmful parents are most often the ones who held the family together the longest. Roughly 70% of estrangements are initiated by the adult child, and the average time spent rationalizing the harm before walking away is over a decade. You are not alone in how long this took you. You are not alone in how quiet the leaving was. If this story reached you, please subscribe so the next one finds you too. Share it with the person you keep almost telling. And the next time you're standing in a hallway holding a tray of something you woke up at 5 in the morning to make for someone who does not see you, put the tray down. Go sit on a porch somewhere.